In this video, I'm going to provide some transparency on the pay rates of YouTube editors in 2024. And I'm doing this because I want to bridge the gap between what YouTube editors want to get paid or deserve to get paid, and also what YouTube creators are willing to pay or even can afford to pay. And this video, we're actually going to break down into 3 parts. In part 1, we're going to talk about all of the influential factors that could play a role in editor pay. In the second part, we're going to go over payment structures, because a flat fee or a salary fee aren't the only ways that we can actually pay editors. And lastly, we're going to go over the price ranges of both short form editors as well as long form editors. One quick thing I want to mention: I have worked with both editors who get paid $30 per edit, as well as editors who are getting $20,000 per month. Because of this experience, that's why I really wanted to make this video and share all of this information with you. So let's begin to talk about the different factors that are going to play a role in editors' pay. So these are factors that are either going to increase their price or decrease their price. And there are a total of 7 of these factors that we're going to look at. The first dependent factor that's going to play a role in editors' pay is whether they are remote or on-site. Now in this case, there is a very easy way to think about this one, but often what we look for is when an editor is remote and we allow them to work remote, we actually look at the industry standard pricing. We don't really look at the region. This is where often people find, oh, I will hire an editor from India, for example, because they're cheaper. But that's different, because in the end, if they're a good editor, they're going to be competing with very high-skilled editors from other regions in the world. So if you're dealing with anybody remote, we don't really look at regional pay. Instead, what we look at is 1, what they're asking, but most of the times we're just looking at industry standard pricing. And we also pay this one because we don't want them to jump ship to another creator just because another creator is willing to pay more. So do the standard pricing and you're going to be fine. Now, on the other hand, if you require an editor to be on site, this means that they have to be on location. So for example, if you're in New York, you require them to be in your office in New York. In those cases, industry standard pricing only gets considered whenever this is higher than the local pricing. So for example, New York is a perfect example where the cost of living is incredibly high. This is where industry standard pricing is probably not going to be high enough to make up for that. So you're going to be paying an extra. Now let's say that you have an office in Bulgaria, for example, right, which is where I'm currently based. In this case, cost of living is extremely low. Now, that's when you could say, oh, but we're on site, so we're going to look at the local payment fees. And that is not actually true. In that case, we're still going back to the industry standard. So this is where, unfortunately, we are paying the highest price, whether that is on location or this industry standard fees. Now, at the end of this video, we're going to go over these fees. These are not set in stone. They're just an average of what I've found and what I've been seeing. And I've verified this with a lot of editors as well as creators to make sure that this kind of accurately represents it. Now, the second factor that's going to play a massive role in editor pay is revisions. And what I mean with this is the amount of revisions or what you're expecting within these revisions. Typically, this is included in the price. So 1 or 2 revisions are kind of expected and this won't affect the price. But if you're a creator who likes 5, 6, 7 or more than 10 revisions, which are exceptional cases, in that case you're often going to see your price be increased. This could be dependent from editor to editor. Now, if you don't require revisions, that is when you're actually having flaws in your editing system. 1 or 2 revisions are always great to have. That way you connect with your editor. Now, one common promise that editors give is unlimited revisions. But this is actually a flawed promise, because in the end, you're not going to do unlimited revisions. It sounds very fancy, but it has very little to no meaning. What this just means is that I'm willing to do revisions as long as you need it, but I don't expect you to give me 10 or 20 revisions. So my advice is this: establish with your editors what's a reasonable amount of revisions, and then go for those amount of revisions. There will be some exceptions, there will be not, but don't have your price go up just because they give unlimited revisions. Revisions are extremely common in this industry. The third factor that's going to play a role is turnaround time and footage length. So let me break these down, and the reason why I put them together is because they actually influence each other quite a bit. Let's begin with turnaround times. Turnaround times on YouTube editing are often 48 hours to 72 hours. This is a very reasonable expectation, but I would address it with an editor. When we want them to turn things around faster, then we are going to pay a premium. Sometimes some creators are willing to give their editor more time, for example, the entire week. And at that point, you could sometimes have a more reasonable pricing, or pricing goes down ever so slightly. Now, this is where footage length does come into play. Sometimes we want to give them a week just because we want to take it easy. Sometimes we want to give them a week because there's no way they can turn things around in 72 hours. This is often because the footage length is way more. For example, you'll have 5 hours or 8 hours of footage, and sometimes they're even unorganized footage. This is when the editor has to go through the entire cut, find all the story beats, put a story together, and figure things out themselves. For both that skill as well as the effort, you're going to pay quite a hefty price a lot of times. And again, this is something you discuss with your editor, but if you think about the editors that are getting paid $20,000 per month, those editors, they create story from scratch most of the times with sometimes hundreds of hours of footage. Now, this is where I always advise creators, if you have such a team or such a content creation team where you have that amount of footage, is to either hire assistant editors, which I'll go into later, or you actually create director's notes. And director's notes are a great way to keep things organized. How do they work? Very simple. Whenever you're recording and you notice that there's key elements or key story elements that you want to include, have a time note with a description, and that way an editor has an easier time navigating through the footage. But again, I can go really deep into this one, but for now, footage length does matter a lot. The fourth point is experience and demand. And currently in this industry, there's one thing you need to know. There's a significant shortage of experienced editors. So all of the top creators are fighting for the same editors. This makes it that if you're one of those experienced editors, the pricing goes up drastically. This is why certain editors you'll find can get paid $10,000, $20,000 a month, or even more than that. Now, that is not an accurate picture of how the market is, what the rates are. That's the reason why at the end of this video, when I go over the rates, we don't look at that much. I just have to say it can affect the pricing. Most creators cannot afford to pay somebody $10,000 a month just for editing 2 videos. That's just realistically not possible. At the end of the day, if an editor feels like they deserve to get paid more, there are people who are going to be willing to pay that. And this is the beautiful part about YouTube, because if you're an editor, it's the Wild West, but it's a perfect opportunity to build a career. The fifth factor is exclusivity. Now, exclusivity isn't uncommon, it's quite common actually in this industry, but when you expect somebody to be exclusive to you, you're going to have a significant increase in pricing. This is where you'll often find that people start getting paid those 20K plus because those people are exclusive to a single creator. Now, sometimes you might think, hey, I don't want to pay extra for exclusivity, but I'm going to say it like this. If you have an editor and he wants to make 5K a month, if you are uploading and giving him 10 edits a month, then yes, he gets his income and that makes sense. But if you are expecting somebody to be exclusive, but you only give them 2 edits per month, now they only make like $1,000 a month. So you cannot reasonably expect exclusivity in that case, because this person would only be able to make $1,000 per month. And in some countries, that's not even enough to make a living. So when you expect exclusivity from an editor, you are often going to see your pricing increase, because you are taking away an editor's opportunity to get paid more elsewhere. Or if you're not paying them enough to make up or supplement their income by other creators. This is my advice. If you don't have enough content, don't expect exclusivity. Unless maybe you're sharing some exclusive details and information, but I've got yet to find a very strong case that people had for exclusivity. So far, we've already gone through 5 of 7 factors that are going to play a role. One is remote or on-site. The second one we're gonna have revisions. We have turnaround time and footage length. Then we have experience and demand, and last we talked about exclusivity. Now next two are even more important to define the pay of the editor. Number 6 is skill and knowledge. And I'm gonna start with both of them. So when an editor has a skill, meaning Adobe After Effects, Photoshop, all those kind of things, if they have more actual skills there, then you'll find yourself often paying more. But if they only need to use Premiere and they only have to cut up footage, then you'll pay less. And this is a huge factor. But there's also knowledge. For example, I've worked with YouTube editors who've never heard of a J-cut and an L-cut. It is basic terminology for some, and others they have never heard of it before. If an editor is aware of certain concepts and how to implement them, their pricing is often gonna go up. Now, if you have an editor who is a really good storyteller, pricing goes up as well. If you have an editor who is great with music, pricing goes up as well. So this is where how knowledgeable an editor is often correlates with the pricing that you're going to have to pay them. Now, if an editor can only cut, and this is often when you train an editor internal, You'll often pay very reasonable, if not very cheap pricing actually, for edits. But the single second they get more tools available that they can work with, or they possess a lot of knowledge, then pricing goes up. And I'm also going to give you a quick list of some factors that could affect pricing related to skill or knowledge. So first we get organizational skills. These are particularly relevant to larger teams, but being able to sort your footage very well and label it very well is very good and can increase pricing. The next one is storytelling or understanding story structure. This is very uncommon, so when you have unsorted raw footage that needs to be meshed together, that skill can drastically increase the price. Next up, we have editing speed. And this is where when you work less, you get paid more. Editors who are fast are so much more valuable, because often this gives you faster time to review, and on YouTube it's a fast turnaround time. You don't have weeks to jump on a trend. You have days, if not hours. So editing speed increases pricing often. You also have the ability to find appropriate music. Music is a very difficult aspect of content creation to master, and therefore an editor who is really proficient in music is extremely valuable, especially because it has a huge impact on things like retention. And that brings me to the next point, is understanding audience retention. Editors don't tend to be analysts. Editors don't tend to understand data, but if an editor does, it makes them more valuable. Audience retention is crucial for success on YouTube. Now, often editors will tell you about retention editing, but that's not really a thing as people think it is, and I'm gonna make a video on that soon. Now, the last factor is proficiency in tools such as After Effects and Photoshop for animations. Yes, somebody who can do animations, their value can double in price. And here, editor, feel free to do some silly animation or something. I'm gonna keep it in. And yeah, the last influential factor, the seventh one, is the role of the editor. And there are three main roles in YouTube. First, we get the lead editor. This is the editor that is responsible for all the polish. Some channels only have a lead editor. This is the person that cuts, that does everything. But they're responsible from the edit from beginning to end. When channels build a larger team, they often also get a second editor. This is like an assistant to the lead editor that has almost the same skills as your lead editor, but is quite not there yet. This person is paid very similar to your lead editor, and they're there to help and assist your lead editor to take some of the tasks from that person's plate. So for example, one segment they will take over completely because the lead editor is busy on the other segments. And the third role is an assistant editor. This is often with larger teams, but because lead editors and second editors can be expensive, you'll often find that for cutting and organizing footage and sorting footage, people will hire assistant editors because it just requires them to sort and organize and cut, and that you can often get for lower pricing. Now in this part, we're going to go over some payment structures. And there's 4 payment structures that I really encourage creators to work with. This also works for editors, by the way. The first way of paying somebody is project-based. This is very simple. It's like a flat fee. It's like, hey, you do an edit, that's 500 bucks. So there's not much I can say about this one. The second one is a monthly salary. So this is where we pay an editor monthly for a certain amount of edits. Sometimes we don't set that amount, sometimes we do, but we keep it reasonable. This is often really good when you get somebody on site, as I mentioned earlier, or when you just want that reliability. I can tell you, if you want to keep an editor for a long time, getting him on a pay like this is sometimes a very smart idea because people love that predictability in their income. Now the third one is performance bonuses or commissions. And this one, there's some variations here, and I'm going to go through 3 variations. The first one is paying an editor just in commission. It's a very rare model, but often this works for automation channels, which is where you pay an editor 50% of the entire revenue of this channel. This often works when you're still early and you're growing a channel and you know it will be successful, but you want to be almost completely hands-off on this one. Often this is where you combine the editor role with the channel manager role, and that works. Now, if there are more people involved, you can bring this pricing down from 50% to 20%, but most of the times you don't really want to go lower than 10% unless you make a lot of revenue. The second option is to lower the base fee that you pay for an editor and add a little bit of commission on top. I love this one particularly. I've applied it before because I thought it was really great. It keeps you motivated, invested as well. So this is where, for example, you pay somebody 200 bucks, and if the video makes a certain amount of views or amount of money, you start paying people 10% or 20% of the future revenue. You can limit this in time. You can say this kicks in from the beginning, first 6 months after upload. You can say this only kicks in the second month. This is where you can go full inspirational and full creative, really. And the third way to do bonuses is by giving them bonuses based on more reviews or longer turnaround times or just general channel performance. This doesn't have to be defined up front. You can just give your editors this one, and eventually they'll learn that, hey, if the channel does well, we get bonuses. Or you could set this on paper, where if the channel reaches this amount of money, we will give you X amount of money. This is a great one, especially for bigger teams, again, because in the end of the day, if you want your editors motivated, share the success with them, and they'll stay motivated to be with you. And the fourth but last one are intangibles. These are amazing, but not all pay happens with money. Education, appearance opportunities, credits, all those kind of things, even helping to get them new jobs, giving them opportunities like trips. These are all great ways, really, to get an editor excited to work for you, and these often exceed monetary value. So you could, for example, send your editor a $500 camera, and this often will feel better than a $1,000 bonus. Now, this is obviously not a way to underpay editors, but especially in the higher range when you're already paying your editors well, these things work fantastic. And this brings me to the part that you've been waiting for. Now, this is going to be very straightforward, but I want to give a notice. These prices aren't set in stone. Next year, they could be outdated. You know, this could change from editor to editor, but this is like a baseline for transparency. And it seems like most editors seem happy with it and most creators seem happy with it. But I have seen people on the lower end of it, lower even, and I've seen people on the higher end of it, way higher than the ones that I state. So first of all, for short form editors, often they get paid $30 to $150 per edit. The range here just depends on the amount of effort that needs to be put into it. If you have more animations, you're looking more towards the 150 range. If you're just looking at a quick cut or even a repurposing, you'll often look at the 30, 40 or 50 range. Now that brings me to the price list of long form editors. And again, I cannot state this enough. This can outdate very quickly, but it's currently reflecting the current market. So for a long-form edit, you're looking at a price of $70 to $1,000 per edit. These are videos around typically 8 to 20 minutes. And here I'm also going to have a breakdown. So often, if you have a bare edit without any visual effects and limited to almost no music, you're looking at a price of $70 to $100 on average. If you have a standard edit without any visual effects and limited music, or even minimal visual effects, you're looking at something between $100 and $250 per edit. If you have a standard edit with slightly more visual effects and some attention to music, sometimes even more, you're looking between $200 and $500 per edit. Now for the next one, we're going to go more skilled, but for a standard edit where you have B-roll and animation and they become more prominent, you're looking at an average between $350 and $700 per edit. Then if we go even further and you want a standard edit where visualization becomes rather complex, you have all these charts on screen, for example, and a lot of B-roll, or sometimes extreme amounts of music, you're looking at $500 to $1,000 per edit. And anything above $1,000 is an edit that is exceptional needs and that requires additional effort or skills to finish. Now, all of these prices can vary very different from each other based on footage length and all of the factors that I mentioned in this video, but this seems to be the average of the current industry. If you're looking at a video with 8 hours of footage and no director's notes, it's not uncommon to pay $1,000 to $2,000 in an edit. So here we go, that's a breakdown what's currently going on. Hopefully it helped some editors, hopefully it helped some YouTube creators. And if you like these breakdowns, there are still some more roles in the YouTube industry that I can go over, but this was definitely a comprehensive breakdown and hopefully it doesn't outdate itself too fast. If you like this, make sure to also subscribe, because I'm going to be doing a lot of these type of breakdowns, as well as video breakdowns on retention and more. Until then, see you next time.